Today's readings are 1 Kings chapter 3, Psalm 119, Romans chapter 8, Matthew chapter 13.
Hi everybody, my name is Michael Pryse. I'm the Bishop of the Eastern Synod, and I'm really happy to be a part of your congregation's worship today. During the few brief years of his public ministry, one thing that Jesus never tired of describing was the kingdom of heaven, the reign of God. And Jesus' descriptions often came as somewhat of a contradiction to what his listeners expected or wanted to hear. They sought a new reign, a new kingdom that would come to God's people in a big way, powerfully, decisively, and quite deservedly. But instead, Jesus persists in describing the kingdom using common imagery from everyday life as being a reality that comes slowly, unexpectedly, and most undeservedly. It's all about God's grace. And the parables included in today's gospel lesson are pictures that describe a kingdom of grace, a reign of grace. The tiny mustard seed grows into a tree that becomes a nesting place for the birds of the air. The birds didn't and couldn't do anything to make it happen. The seed, the kingdom, grew of its own volition and nature. It's pure grace. Likewise with the yeast, the kingdom. It's mixed by a baker, God, into 3 measures of flour, the world. Now keep in mind that those 3 measures, biblical measures, are the equivalent of a bushel basket of flour, 128 cups or 16 5-pound bags. And furthermore, when the baker adds the 42 or so cups of water that's needed to make it come together, you're talking about 100 pounds of dough, throughout which she needs to disperse the yeast. This woman must have had forearms like Popeye, but she does it. God kneads that dough until the yeast, the kingdom, is dispersed throughout. It's everywhere. It's got to be everywhere. That's the only way that dough can become bread. The yeast breathes life into the loaf. It is a gift of grace. Jesus then goes on to liken the kingdom to a great treasure that somebody found. He didn't earn it or make it. He found it. It's a straight up gift. And the finder considers it to be so valuable that he sells everything in his possession in order to keep it. Likewise with a pearl merchant who finds one pearl of great value. We can imagine it's perfect in size, composition, and color. It is a one-in-a-lifetime find. It is grace, an amazing and wondrous, unexpected grace that again is worth everything that the man has. Jesus concludes his kingdom riff by describing the kingdom as being like a net, the kind that you would drag through the sea. It catches fish of all kinds, seeming without any discrimination, until the net is full. Good fish, bad fish, it seems to make no difference. They are all caught up in the kingdom. It's a picture of God's grace, about the amazing breadth and capacity of the reign of God. And it's only then, after laying out these 5 parable pictures of this grace-steeped, grace-infused kingdom, that Jesus finally turns to the question of what will happen in eternity. At the end of the age, when after the great resurrection, there is a time of judgment. And let's be honest, we've been waiting for this. That's the place where most of us would prefer to begin the discussion of the kingdom. Enough with these cryptic fables, Jesus. Finally, we get the kind of gun-barrel justice that we would expect from any king worthy to wear a crown. But don't be so quick. Context always matters. And we need to read these words recognizing that the rhetorical weight of Jesus' whole discourse has to do with the graciousness and the universal breadth of the reign of God. The kingdom is a free and undeserved gift that you can't earn, create, or manufacture. Therefore, inasmuch as God will one day provide judgment, I think we can assume and trust that this is a judge whose nature it is to acquit everyone, to free everyone. The scriptures do, of course, tell us that, sadly, there are some who will reject this kingdom and the reconciliation that God gives to us through it. The outcome of that choice is a self-judgment. Who could imagine a worse hell? Episcopal theologian and author Robert Farrar Capon describes it this way: the very hell of hell lies precisely in the fact that its inhabitants will be insisting on a perpetual rejection of an equally perpetual gift. It will be an eternal struggle to escape from the gift of a love that will never let them go. Can you imagine a darker hell than that? It's been said, and wisely so, that it's only by being little that we can ever discover anything that is big. To a small child, everything seems big. Mom and Dad, they're like giants. They dwell in the stratosphere of adults. You go to the school for the first time, the first day, and the place just seems huge. It's only when you grow up that you come to see that Mom and Dad weren't so big after all. That vast schoolhouse only had 8 classrooms. When you're little, everything seems big. And likewise, in matters of the faith, it's only by being little that you can really imagine and experience those things that are really big. I think that's one of the key points of the gospel. The kingdom that Jesus describes is always recognized from a perspective of smallness and humility, a perspective where the first become last and the last become first. And maybe the only way for us to start recognizing the reign that Jesus points us toward, the only way for us to more fully experience God's reign of grace, the kingdom of heaven, is by taking the risk of making ourselves just a little bit smaller. About 30 years ago, a Canadian author named Douglas Copeland burst onto the literary scene with a novel whose title coined the now familiar Generation X term. In his follow-up short story, a collection entitled Life After God, Copeland describes the Gen Xers as perhaps the first generation in human history to experience a life without God. It reads as a lament for a generation that feels very much adrift, but it also carries prominent grace notes of hope. Near the end of the book, Copeland tells a friend about an experience he had in Stanley Park in Vancouver. It goes like this. "Did I ever tell you," I said, "about the time last year in Stanley Park when Mark and I went rollerblading? No, you didn't. Well, there was this group of blind people, like with white canes and everything, a CNIB tour or something. They heard us coming and they motioned for us to stop, and we did. Then they handed Mark a camera and asked him to take their picture. Blind people? Exactly. But the strange thing was, they still believed in sight. They still believed in pictures. On the last page of the book, Copeland shares a secret with us. He writes, "Now here is my secret. I tell it to you with an openness of heart that I doubt I shall ever achieve again. So I pray you are in a quiet room as you read these words. My secret is that I need God, that I am sick and can no longer make it alone. I need God to help me give because I no longer seem capable of giving, to help me be kind because I no longer seem capable of kindness, to help me love as I seem beyond being able to love." Although he might use different words to describe it, I think Copeland has taken the first and most important step toward discovering the kingdom. A state of being that proceeds not from bigness and power, but from smallness and humility. A state that's found in recognizing our complete neediness and dependence upon the grace and love of the one who is the author and the source of all existence, of all life. I believe that our world and its inhabitants have a deep desire to experience that kingdom today. Many of us know the emptiness and the hollowness of the false gospels upon which much of life is now based, which dominate our life. I think the hunger for a new way of living is evident all around us. As blind as our world sometimes seems, as blind as we often are, I think that most of us still believe in pictures, in the possibility of a better way, a renewed world, a new kingdom. This time of living through pandemic has amplified the pangs of that hunger. It has prodded and inspired acts of kindness and generosity, a renewed care for and love for creation and for community. The righteous appeals of anti-racism protesters around the world have pulled at our hearts and pricked our consciousness. We long for something better. We hunger for and long to see and experience that life which is life indeed. Life in its intended justness, fullness, and abundance. Life in the kingdom. Today, we are given an opportunity to renew our residency in that special kingdom whose embrace has come to us as a gift that is predicated fully and completely upon God's grace, not upon what we've done or not done, what we have or don't have. The kingdom is already within us and around us. God's already given it. All we need to do is live it.